everybody. Happy Thursday. Long time no see. No you seeing us, but now here we are. Welcome to Tachy Talks. Today we have a very exciting episode. We're going to be talking about the reason for the season, the interviewing season, that is. Nobody laughed. Okay.
I was laughing.
Wait, that was a joke?
Yeah, like the reason for the season.
I mean,
during Christmas, but it's the interviewing season.
I thought you were gonna go into a rap over there. You're rhyming everything.
Drop a beat for her, Advi. Drop her a beat.
But before we get into that, I'm here with my two pals. My name is Haley. Pals, introduce yourselves.
Hello, everyone. It's been a minute. My name is Advi Desai. I am a pal of Haley, who just introduced herself, and then there's another pal.
I'm Kylie. Every time.
And my pals, what have you been up to this week, Advi?
It's been a while. It's not even been a week. What has it been,
have
like
you
a
been
month?
Up to since the last time that we heard from you?
Well, it has been a month. First of all, I hope everyone had a really good Christmas break, holiday, winter break, whatever it is. And I had a break that I definitely needed. It's been pretty good. We had an exam before the break happened, so it was good. We got to relax during the break. Nothing too crazy because where I live right now, the cases of COVID have been going up a lot. So we have gone back into lockdown. Everything's been closed. Haven't really been able to do anything, just been at home. But one exciting thing is that the NBA has started up again. So I'm currently just following basketball. I'm in 2 different fantasy leagues right now, and that's taking up all my time. Probably shouldn't have joined either of them because I end up getting no work done near the end of the day because I'm just watching basketball all day. But it's been pretty good. Back to school now. Just busy.
Busy with his Anki decks.
Busy with my Anki decks. Kylie, what's up? What's going on in your life?
Same thing. The past few weeks has been a nice break, except this has been happening to me since elementary school. You take the few weeks off school and then getting back in the groove after those 2 weeks, especially after the holiday break in December, so difficult. So I'm struggling right now. Same thing. We're in lockdown here as well. Well, I guess all of Ontario is in lockdown, so there's really not much for any of us to do anywhere. NFL playoffs are right now. I am a Patriots fan, which means I'm actively rooting for the Bucks not to win because we don't like Tom Brady anymore. I'm hoping for an upset because we're filming on the 9th. So I'm hoping for an upset tonight with the Washington football team.
That's good enough. That's good enough.
But yeah, I don't really know who I want to win. I'm kind of feeling the Browns to win. Not that I think they'll win, but I just think that'd be so nice for them.
Yeah, because they've just been such a bad team for so many years.
Just forever.
It would just be lovely for them, and I just want them to have a good time.
Exactly. Yeah. I just want what's best for them and best for the league, and the best thing is Tom Brady not winning this year. Anyways, I'm not in an NFL pool, but I am in a very exciting pool with Haley. We are in a bachelor pool because this is also the most exciting time of the year for reality TV fans because the Bachelor, I hate that, is on TV right now. So Haley and I are in a pool. Haley's doing really good though.
Why don't you tell them who won the pool last week? Who won last week's pool?
Haley won, and there's I think last time I checked there was 15 people in it. I think there's more now. And this is for we pay $10 to go in. So Haley's doing pretty good right now.
I've never watched a season of Bachelor before. I watched The Bachelorette for the first time in the fall. I based all my picks off of who was from Canada, who was in the healthcare field, and then there was one girl who said she was a socialite, and I thought that was really funny, so I picked her. And that's how I won. So follow your heart, people.
Follow your dreams.
Follow your dreams. To The Bachelor. I think the season's going to be very spicy. It seems very dramatic already, so I guess we'll see. What did you get up to this week, Haley?
Before I get into what I got up to, when they're Kylie is literally the personification of get you a girl who can do both. Did you see how flawlessly she just flipped from talking about football to The Bachelor?
I know. Look at that transition.
Flawless.
That's some good interview skills right there to transition from one topic to another.
Yes.
I do love my football, and I really, really love my Bachelor. So.
And we love you. Aw, cute.
Oh my god, this is so heartwarming. This
I
is what I needed. I'm so emotional this week. You're gonna make me cry.
Guys, it's not February yet. We're still in January.
Sorry. February's a big month for me and Kylie.
Oh, God, I don't want to talk about it. Okay, start talking about it.
Anyways, what did I get up to? Well, we've started the psych unit in school. So we're learning about psychiatry. It's a lot of content.
A lot of drugs.
A lot of drugs. Yeah.
A lot of drugs.
Did my first day today volunteering at the vaccination clinic in Windsor. So we're doing COVID vaccines, which is really cool. Got trained on everything, got to meet a lot of people, got to wear my cool new scrubs. So feeling pretty legit. But now I have to catch up on work and meal prep and all of that stuff. So yay. Yeah. We actually got a comment the other day, and if this was you who commented this, thanks, you're great. Somebody commented on one of our older videos saying we need more of the first 15 minutes, and I watched the first 15 minutes and it was us talking about like Yu-Gi-Oh cards and golfing, and they said they wanted more of that. So give the people what they want.
Give the people what they want. Look, listen, you want a Yu-Gi-Oh card episode? I'll give you a Yu-Gi-Oh card episode.
Next episode, more of just like the witty banter.
I think they're just looking for Yu-Gi-Oh cards specifically.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Next episode.
For Secret Santa, one of my roommate had Advait, Katie, the infamous Katie, and we Nicky 9-doored him to give him his present. And this is not part of the story. We'll get back to the Yu-Gi-Oh cards in a second. But we very much confused his dad, A. But B, she had this whole dilemma because she couldn't decide if she should get you Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I can't speak. Or if she should get you, she ended up getting you like a Pokemon watch for PCCM, like clinical skills. But she had a very big debate if she should get you Yu-Gi-Oh cards.
It's hilarious because like they're treating me like I'm a 5-year-old kid. Like, should I get him a Pokemon watch? Should I get him some Yu-Gi-Oh cards? I don't know. Maybe he wants a Tamagotchi. What should we get?
That would have been a sweet gift, a Tamagotchi.
Do they even sell those anymore?
I'm sure somebody does.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody. I remember like everybody in the playground used to have that in grade school. And then like the Tamagotchis can marry each other or something.
No, they got banned from my elementary school.
Really?
They got banned from mine too. Silly bands got banned from my school too.
Us too. Haley, you and I are like the same person these days.
Yeah, pretty much. I feel like I always had this issue where like by the time I convinced my parents to get me something that was on trend, it was like the end of the trend, you know? Like I got a Tamagotchi, but I probably got it like a month or two before people stopped playing with them. Or like I got Bratz dolls at finally so much convincing, and then people weren't playing with Bratz dolls anymore. So, you know, like I was just always a loser is
you know what I hate?
Moral of the story.
About Bratz. When you took their shoes off, they didn't have feet. They just had those
they just had pegs.
That's so creepy.
Wow.
Yo, I don't know, like dolls actually creep me out sometimes though. Like they do.
We got my nephew a baby for Christmas, and my sister explicitly told me not to get one that cries, but she sent it to me and I bought it, but this one cries real tears because you can feed it water and then it'll recycle the tears to cry, and it is the creepiest thing ever.
Yeah.
Next time on Tachy Talks, has technology gone too far?
Especially the dolls that like pee and poop too, and you gotta like change their diaper. I'm like, oh my god, like why would you buy this for your kid? I would never buy that
why
for
do you
somebody.
want to net their child?
Like no, I'm not getting that for anybody. Nope.
No.
Well, I don't know what we were even talking about, but here we are.
We are here. Take the moment in.
All right, let's get into the episode.
Before we get into that, I just
want
to say
wait.
It's nice because, well, obviously I haven't seen you guys in a very, very long time. I don't even remember the last time I saw you, other than when we Nicky 9-doored you and then drove down the street, but we didn't actually see you. But other than that, like, it's just so nice to talk to you guys again.
Yeah, I know. It's been a minute, even though I saw you like 2 days ago in lecture, but it's been a minute.
That doesn't count.
No, that doesn't count because you can't actually like talk.
You're right. I'm just being rude. I'm just playing with your emotions here. But yeah, it's nice.
Anyways, before we jump into it, as per usual, everything we're gonna say today, our opinions only, especially today because we're talking about interviewing. Obviously, everything we say is just based on our opinions only. It doesn't guarantee you that you're going to get admitted to med school. It's some stuff that worked for us, some stuff that's worked for our friends, things that we wish we did, just looking back on our experiences. So please don't come for us. These are merely just tips. And oh yeah, we don't represent the views of our institution. I think that's everything.
Yeah.
It covers it all.
All the time. We don't represent our institution. But one big thing that I want to get into before we start is so we are talking about med school interviews here, specifically Canadian schools. But if you are applying to American schools, or if you're applying to things like dentistry school, pharmacy school, or even like other random jobs at a research lab, I think the information we're saying today might still be helpful to you, because we're talking a lot about personal experiences and how to word things and how to like research for interviews. So stick around and maybe we can help you a little bit.
Yeah, so today we're just going to do like a general overview of interview types, tips and tricks, like Kylie was saying. In the future, we will have another interview episode where we collect your questions. So if there's anything that we don't cover today, write it down somewhere, and there will be an Instagram story up soon. And if you need it sooner than that, our DMs are always open. But I think we can get started off by just talking about the interview types. So if you don't know, there are two big category types of interviews in medical school: the panel and the multiple mini interview, or the MMI. And then there are a couple of variations on that, which we'll also talk about. But Advait, do you want to kick us off talking about panels?
Sure, yeah. So the big thing is that all the universities kind of have their own thing, like what Haley said. Not all the universities are going to have panels. Not all the universities are going to have MMIs. Some might also have mixtures. But panel is the most, I think, traditional interview that type that there is. So usually what a panel is you're just sitting in front of a group of maybe 3 or 4 people. And they're just asking questions and you're answering the questions. It's basically what you would expect a job interview to be like, or an interview for pretty much anything. It's super traditional. And the big difference between the different type of panels is that some universities will have open panels and some will have closed. And what that means is, in an open panel, they will have your entire application in front of them, so they can ask you specific questions from your application. So, for example, if you put down that you were playing soccer on the university team, they might ask you specific questions about you playing soccer on the university team. Meanwhile, in a closed panel, they legit don't know anything about you. You are coming into them and you have to do your best to introduce yourself to them, talk about all your experiences, because these are brand new people that know absolutely nothing about you. So those are the two main types of panels. Usually they run for about like 30 to 45 minutes. I'm sure it varies depending on the school. But yeah, what it really is just question after question after question. Usually answers take 3 to 4 minutes, and that's about all there really is to it. Am I missing anything you guys want to add?
No, I think that covers what a panel is.
Yeah. And then the big thing is for med interviews, I guess, type of questions that might be asked in panels. So the first few questions are usually personal questions, like tell me about yourself, or why do you want to pursue medicine, or tell me about like a day in a life, something like that. And then later on, as you progress, they're going to ask you more personal questions about different clubs and activities you were part of. They might ask you about any hardships you faced. And then usually for med interviews, you do tend to get some ethics questions. And we'll go into some resources you can use to get help for answering these ethical based questions. But they might ask you something like, oh, there's a patient in front of you who's having this issue, but there's somebody else having this issue. What would you do first? Or I'm just listing like random ideas, but also ethical questions like, oh, there's a homeless person in front of you and you're strictly told not to do this by your employer. What would you do? Things like that. So you get a little bit of everything in these panel interviews.
I think one important thing to know is that, like Advait said, especially in a closed book interview where they don't know anything about you, it's really on you to highlight your best qualities and tell them about yourself and all of the big things you've done. And sometimes they won't ask the right question for you to highlight those things. And at the end of the interview, I actually did this. They said, is there anything else that you want us to know? And they hadn't asked me why I wanted to do medicine, or like when I realized I wanted to do medicine, or anything like that. So I said, can I tell you about how I came to the realization that I wanted to do medicine? And they were like, yeah, for sure. And I laid it all out for them, which was something that I thought a lot about, because I just kind of figured they were going to asked me about it. And I think I was able to highlight a lot of key features of like who I am and why I wanted to go to medical school there. So don't be afraid. I mean, like, don't just randomly be like, can I tell you about the time that I saved a kid from a burning building? You know, like there has to be some sort of like purpose to it. But I really wanted to show these people like, here's why I want to go to medical school. Here's why I want to go to your medical school. And don't be like they ask you at the end, is there anything else you want to tell us? And don't be afraid if you haven't been able to highlight something that you really wanted to kind of throw that in there, because it's your interview. You're in charge of the interview. And that's something that I think a lot of times you go in there and you think you're kind of at the mercy of these panelists, but you're not. You're the one steering the ship here. So don't be afraid to do that.
And you're going to see that a lot. What a lot of interviewing is, it's just practicing. And when you practice enough questions, you kind of internally learn how to change any question to answer something else. It sounds a little weird, but when you practice enough, you can change the question that are asked to become a specific question that you want to answer. Another thing is, sorry, what were you saying, Kylie?
No, I was just going to say, I'm sure we'll talk about this a bit later, but just with CanMed's rules, that's something we really drilled in for like the application process. That also applies for your interviews as well. But they're never, ever going to be like, tell me a time where you were a scholar, or tell me a time where you were a good communicator. Like that, they don't ask those kinds of questions. And honestly, like, I don't remember, I have pretty much, that day was so nerve-wracking. I've like blacked that day out of my mind. I don't really remember the specific questions they asked us, but just as Advait was saying, like you want to direct the interview in a certain direction, or I think one of you said that you can direct in certain directions, and make sure you remember those words and you bring up those words. And a lot of that is the practice and remembering, like I like to go through CanMeds, even now when I read people's applications, like go through and find those buzzwords that they're writing over and over again in each of those sections. So that's another really good thing to do as well. It comes with practice. Sorry,
and you always want to ask questions at the end of the interview. It shows that you are interested in the program, interested in the university. So always come prepared with at least 2 to 3 questions to ask them. But yeah, I think that's it for the panel. We can talk a little bit more about how to like kind of skew questions and answers to be what you want it to be. But I think right now we'll just transition into MMI interviews and like the style that they're given.
Yeah, so MMI stands for multiple mini interview. I know some schools have variations on it. I did my MMI at Dalhousie. I think it was like a pretty typical MMI style. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So the way that it was set up, that there were 12 stations. Each station was 7 minutes long. And so a bell goes above you. It's really nerve-wracking. A bell rings, you walk up to the door of whatever station you're starting at, and there's a prompt on the door. So you read it, you have 2 minutes to read it, and then another bell goes and you walk into the room. I think it was 7 minutes in the room. And then a bell goes again, and then you go on to the next room and you do it all over again. There were 2 rest stations. So 10 active stations, 2 rest stations. The rest stations were awful because you just sat there and kind of like wait for your fate in the next room. But it was fine. The med students were really nice. They were there to support you. There's a couple different categories of questions that you'll see in MMI. So you'll see ethical questions where you have to go in and sometimes they'll just ask you what your opinion is, and other times they'll ask you to argue a specific side of an ethical dilemma. And it might not necessarily be the side that you agree with, which is why it's important to practice identifying all stakeholders and all solutions to ethical problems, which we will talk about in a bit. Another section was questions about you. So they might ask you just like, what do you do in your free time? How do you relax? Very casual. Those were, I think, some of my favorite stations because very low pressure. There are sometimes teamwork stations. So there were 2 stations that were connected to one another. You went with another applicant, you had a teamwork task to do together, and then your next station, you would be in that same room again, just doing the opposite role of whatever you did the first time. And those are usually like tasks about communication and teamwork and stuff like that. And then there are role-playing stations. So you might be given like an actual situation that's going on inside of the room with actors, and you have to walk in there and you have a certain role and you deal with that situation. So it's a very interesting and unique interview style. You have to be very to the point, and kind of, because each room you want to go in and introduce yourself because you haven't met this interviewer yet, but you also kind of have to get to the point of whatever material you've been given to pretty quickly because you only have 7 minutes, or however long. I think it varies at some schools. And it goes by really quickly, and it's very strange, but in a good way. It's a very like interesting experience, and probably not one that you've had before. And the good thing is it's probably not one that a lot of other applicants have had before either. So even if they've done a million panel interviews, you're kind of all on a level playing field for the MMI. Yeah, I mean, that's what an MMI is. We'll go into more tips and tricks and stuff later. Basically, whatever we say for panel can apply to MMI because it's all about how you present yourself, how you present your ideas. You're just given a shorter time frame to do so in the MMI. I also found that it can be a little bit difficult to like switch tasks. I know that's something that some people struggle with, and you kind of have to do that in the MMI. So it is kind of important to be able to pick up the task, and you either answer the question, you answer it well, and you feel good about that station, or you don't feel good about that station, and you need to be able to say, okay, I don't feel good about that station, but I'm going on to the next one, and I kind of have to leave this at this door kind of thing. So that's a skill that you can practice as well. And it's a fresh start every time you walk into a room, which is nice.
Yeah, that's really good. Because like
yeah.
in panel, sometimes if you make a really big blunder in the beginning and you're sitting with the same 3 or 4 people for the next 45 minutes, you start to think about it. It gets in your head like, oh my God, I messed up that one question. They probably think I'm dumb. I'm with them for the next like 30 minutes. And then you try really hard to mess up, or try really hard not to mess up. And then meanwhile in MMI, you have a fresh start. You know, you mess up once, it's whatever. Just, you got to keep going.
Right. Yeah. So, and then Kylie, did you want to talk about some of our special cases?
Yes. Okay. So I would say that the foundation for all med school interviews are the panel and the MMI. There are a few situations across Canada, though, where things are a bit different. So I have a few things pulled up on my computer screen. I would say the most prominent difference is what UFT does, which is the modified personal interview, which is basically a combination of MMI and panel at the same time. None of us interviewed at UFT, so none of us can talk about our experiences there, but I'm going to read you what they tell you on the website. So basically it says the MPI developed by UFT's Faculty of Medicine, and it was launched in 2014. They're doing it virtually this year, as are I think every single med school in Canada is doing their med school interview virtually this year, at least the ones I've checked, which has been all of Ontario, East Coast definitely, and some of Quebec I've checked, and UBC. So it says that it consists of 4 independent interviews assessed by 4 different interviewers. So 4 different stations with 4 different interviewers, and they're closely connected to UFT's medical community and may include physicians, medical students, residents, health professionals, and community members. And each interview is approximately 12 minutes in length. So each of those 4 stations would be 12 minutes. The virtual MPI also consists of 4 independent interviews by 4 different raters. Raters are also closely connected to the medical community and may include physicians, medical students. Yeah. Okay. So the first thing I read you was basically what would happen if it wasn't virtually. Because it is virtually this year, there's 4 different interviews assessed by 4 different raters. So I believe it's the same thing. That being said, the schools, if you get chosen to do an interview, are going to send you all this information, and they're going to tell you exactly what you need to do, how you need to register. And I know that Max traditionally come out probably this week, whereas the rest of the schools in Ontario, at least, will come out closer to the end of January. That being said, everything can change. This year is totally different because of COVID. And then the other special case that you have is sometimes a school won't just do panel, or they won't just do MMI. So Queens, for example, they have both a panel and an MMI interview. They're special because this year they have their MMI at the end of February, and then you have another date where you have to do another interview for your panel interview. Traditionally, when this was done in person, you would do your panel and you do your MMI, I think, or vice versa. Either way, you have to do one of each at Queens. UBC, just in terms of other schools, in case you're curious, Western does a panel. Ottawa I don't know if you guys know about Ottawa. I couldn't find anything on their website. Panel? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know about NOSM?
I think it's MMI.
I'm not sure.
I think it's MMI.
Okay.
I can Google it.
And then Memorial also does that panel and MMI thing. So they have a 30-minute 2-person panel traditional interview, and then they have 8 6-minute multiple mini interview stations as well. I saw McGill called it M3I, and I kind of like that. Just rolls off the tongue nicer. UBC as well, they did a virtual MMI, and then McGill as well also does an MMI. So make sure you check each school once they send out your interview invites. How you prepare for them does differ a little bit, but that being said, a lot of what you prepare for in a panel will come up in an MMI, and a lot of what you do in an MMI will come up in a panel. And I think Advait was saying this before about getting worrying about like if you mess something up in your interview. Most of the time, at least I find, is that you think you mess up, but the person rating you doesn't think you messed up, and you're just getting in your head. So what's happened. And honestly, I know it's hard to separate what's happened with what's coming forward, but if you can just say, okay, whatever, and keep going, that's what I tried to do during my interview. And at this point, if you couldn't tell, I talk really fast. I also think really fast, I think. So my interview, I was the first person finished on my day, and that really stressed me out. You know, looking back on interviews, I guess we're gonna talk about what we wish we could change later, but try not to stress about it. Like once it's over, there's nothing you can do, and it's a very long waiting game, but it's worth it.
Yeah, I think since we're talking about tips, we might as well just go into some more tips, and then later on we'll talk about what we all did individually to prepare.
I just want to say before we jump into tips, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you. This isn't directly related to interviewing, but it is, I think, important. And that is, if you are able to be there the night before and go scope out where exactly you need to be, that will relieve a lot of stress. I don't know. For me, it did. If I want to know what parking lot I'm going to park in and what door I'm going to walk through. And if you can go scope out the night before, that's helpful. And then a lot of schools, and I think they're doing them virtually this year, hopefully, but a lot of schools will have like mixers the night before. And if you are available, go to those, because it's nice to like recognize a med student or another interviewee the day of, and it can help relieve some stress. And then if they are doing any sort of tour afterwards, so a virtual tour or meet the faculty or anything like that, and you have time to stay for that as well, because it gives you like an idea of the school and everything. And I just think a lot of times, because it's a stressful experience. It's a very stressful experience overall. Like nobody's doubting that. And because it is, a lot of people just want to get in and get out. But those things are great. And usually the meds classes make little videos for you to watch, and they put a lot of effort into them, and they're pretty funny. So it's nice to see those and to chat with some other people on the interview trail. And if you have the opportunity to stick around for those things, I would definitely recommend it.
Yeah, for sure. Those are really big things. But yeah, I mean, those are tips too.
Yeah. I just really weren't like interviewing tips. They were just like general life tips. And then I guess you're not really going to check what parking lot you're parking in this year, but people will be listening to this podcast for years down the road. So I wanted to say that. But this year, make sure you have a good internet connection, a good microphone, and a good camera. Invest in a ring light.
A microphone too, though. Like even for this podcast, I know it's an additional expense, but they're a good microphone. You can get it for a decent amount of money. I think like $50 to $80. You sound really good. It's nice.
Yeah, I mean, like if everything's good, then don't worry about buying these extra things.
Yeah.
But like I'm saying, if you do have like a very old laptop, webcam's kind of like really bad, you might want to invest in maybe getting a better webcam, or at least borrowing one from your friend or something. I don't know.
That's what I was just going to say. Like if you and your friends are all applying and you don't happen to have interviews at the same time on the same day, buy one as a group and then drop it off in each other's mailboxes. Like you can figure it out. By no means is it necessary. I don't want to make you feel like it's necessary for you to get in, but it's just those little things that if you are able to do that, it might help relax you a bit for the interview. So it's all about making yourself comfortable and like check what's in your background. Like you probably don't want to have a background like this when you're interviewing of all your closet. So check what your background looks like. I would get dressed entirely, like including pants.
Just in case, you never know. You never
Work on the top, party on the bottom.
I mean, you can wear your slippers if you want. I would endorse slippers, but probably wear some pants.
with what Haley was saying too, just like I don't quote me on this because obviously like I haven't looked into what our school is doing for interviews this year because I have a million other things on my mind right now. But I know last year it went around, especially because the interview switched from in-person to virtual in 2 week span. Like coronavirus really snuck up on all of us.
Yeah, it was pretty
when
sudden.
it really shouldn't have. But yeah, no, I don't think the school penalizes for those things for you, but if your internet's unstable or if your camera looks kind of choppy, those things get in your head after a while. And it just makes your day so much more relaxing if that doesn't happen. And I mean, at least for us, they understand. Like if we're writing an exam and the internet craps out, for lack of a better term, or we're in a group session. Actually, I was in a group session with Admate the other day and I was getting asked a question in my interview at that one point in time, decided to stop working. So they get it. They understand. It's a reality of the situation. But if you can decrease those distractors for yourself, it'll help a lot.
And honestly, it's a two-way thing. Their internet can also crash the interviewers. So I know some of my friends that applied to med school last year and they had virtual interviews and their facilitators or their interviewers had their internets crash and it was like super awkward. But
I think the best thing to do is just to be like, oh, well, with Zoom interviews comes crashing, like make a little joke and then move on. It is the reality of our lives right now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it's not something that you get like frustrated over.
Another good tip that I just thought about, download the app that you're using the night before. Nothing worse than if you don't have Zoom or Teams or something on your computer and you have 2 minutes before your interview and you're downloading it and suddenly doesn't want to download because Adobe Flash isn't working, whatever. Make sure you have it all set up the night before. And kind of similar to what Haley was saying, like having a place to stay, scoping everything out. You can do that on your computer too. That'll decrease your stress so much. Like I've had to do meetings on Teams and we use Zoom for the most part. So like I'll go in and like go play around with Teams just so I remember how to use it. Or my QI project, we use like a different kind of thing too. So there's all different kinds of platforms as well. The other thing though, if interviews are not virtual, getting a place in the city where you're interviewed, that really helps. Haley mentioned that. And in terms of like meeting med students and meeting other people, other applicants, a lot of the schools, at least our school, they did a billeting program. So you can sign up and stay with one of the med students. They'll have some kind of accommodation for you. I personally didn't do that. I was lucky enough to get a hotel room where we were interviewing the night before. And that just helps decrease stress too. At least for me, I was from 2 hours away. So it helps to not get stuck in traffic or,
Yeah, I came from Peterborough down to London for my interview. And which is like it should only be a 3-hour drive, but it's through Toronto. So it ended up being like 4.5 hours. And I was just, the whole time I was like, thank God I'm going down the night before, because I literally would have missed my interview right now if I had gone the day of. So
let me tell you guys a story actually, just regarding that. So when I had my interviews, I think it was March 2nd, I had Ottawa. March 3rd, I had Western. So my Western was
That's awful.
I know, but like
very unfortunate.
The thing is, I was just assigned these dates. Like for Western, you got to choose what date to do the interview. I didn't get any of the dates I chose.
That's so weird. I got my very first choice.
Yeah, I didn't. I didn't get any. And then they said, sorry, you're not registered for any interviews. You're on the wait list to sign up for a date.
What?
Yeah. And then I got March 3rd. It was weird. It was really weird.
That was at Western?
At Western, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
Because like I got an interview and then we had to like go online and select your date. For some reason, it said I never selected a date, even though I did. But whatever. I flew to Ottawa the night before. So March 1st, I flew to Ottawa, stayed there the night. March 2nd, did my Ottawa interview, left to the airport right away because I had another interview the next day. And my flight got delayed. I ended up reaching London at like 2 a.m. on March 3rd. And my interview was at 10 a.m.
So I didn't know that.
God,
yeah,
thank God it was you. Thank God it was you, Advate, because Kylie and I would have lost our minds.
I would have been freaking out.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing I was freaking out with was when my airplane would come because it got delayed.
Yeah.
Or like when it would leave. I forgot what the problem was, but like when I would actually depart. But then once we departed, I'm like, all right, it's whatever. I don't need sleep. Like you don't. So the big thing is I'm just here, But yeah, I ended up getting like 4 hours of sleep or something, and then I had to wake. I called my mom at like 3 a.m, and I'm like, yo, listen, I haven't gone to bed yet. Can you like call me at 7 a.m, wake me up? because I'm not gonna wake up from an alarm.
Aw.
And
Were
then
you staying with friends in London, or did you stay in a hotel?
at a hotel.
Okay.
Both days I stayed at a hotel. I didn't want
Okay.
to stay with people just
Okay.
because I knew that like the way I roll, like my schedule and stuff would be different than everyone else's. And I knew I had like 2 interviews back to back, so I'd have to be in a rush both days. That's why I didn't want to do it. But that's why the big thing is, yeah, for sure. You want to book everything way beforehand. If you are going in person, I mean, make sure you get there early so things like that don't happen.
You know, same for, I don't know if there's any like med students listening, and obviously I have yet to experience this. I hope to experience this one day. But with CARMs and interviews and stuff, like I've told similar things can happen. Like you'll have an interview at UBC and then I don't think they communicate as much. I'm not sure, haven't gone through CARMs yet. But you could be in like Dal the next day, so in Halifax, and have to get across the country and then go back to Calgary. I heard it was just 2 weeks of crazy flying back and forth, and it was really exhausting. So very interesting. I guess the same tips apply.
Yeah, for sure. And like for any interview, you want to always arrive early too, right?
Yeah.
Your interview's at 10 a.m. Don't log on at 10 a.m. Try to log on beforehand, unless they specifically tell you some instructions like, oh, the waiting room won't open at 9:50 or something. Then sure, arrive at 9:50, but always be prepared. You should be sitting down on your computer table, wherever you're going to do the interview, at least like 20 to 30 minutes beforehand, in my opinion. Just ready to go.
Yeah.
For sure.
Now that we've talked about logistical tips, let's talk about interview tips.
Interview tips, okay. Yo, one big interview tip, okay? For
Be
all you
yourself.
That's what I was gonna say. Be yourself. Be genuine.
Be yourself. That's true. Yes. But another big interview tip I was gonna say was, don't be afraid to tell them you need to think about the answer for a few seconds. Right? Sometimes they'll ask you a question, and obviously you're not expecting because you don't know what they're gonna ask you, but it can catch you off guard. So don't be afraid to be like, okay, can you just give me a minute to think about this? And they'll be perfectly fine with it. If you're doing a panel, maybe you don't want to do that for every question because you're with them the whole time and it'll make you seem unprepared. But every now and then you can definitely tell them that you just need a quick moment to think about what you want to say.
Here's what I find whenever I'm like, can I just have a moment to think about it? For the next 30 seconds, my brain goes, and I can't think of anything.
Or it's, it's like, think of something. Say, talk.
I always do that. Yeah, my brain's always like, think of something.
My brain goes, no think. No think.
Along the same lines of that though too, also don't be afraid to ask them to repeat the question. I remember there was one question that was it had a lot of details in it, and I remember being like, my brain as they were repeating the question was wee. And then so I had to get them to repeat it, but that's totally fine. Like they don't dock you on that kind of stuff. Like don't be afraid to do it. I don't think they do, at least. We have no insight into the admission process.
Yeah, we don't know.
But I mean, like if I was interviewing somebody, I wouldn't dock them for making me, re-ask a question personally. But
no, that happens in life too. It's like when you're talking to someone, you say, "Oh, hey, pardon, what?"
Yeah.
You want to speak up and clearly, because if they can't understand what you're saying, then you're not going to get good scores.
You know what's the best way to speak clearly? Good posture. It helps. It really does.
Sit up now.
If you're doing an interview, definitely need trust me, it's a big thing.
One thing I think that I did that I really like, just talking about posture and speaking clearly, is I got a lot of feedback that I needed to slow down when I talked. So they told me to record myself, and I was going through my computer the other day and I had all these videos of me talking about why I wanted to go into medicine. It was kind of cute, but you can go, I don't know what every school is using. I saw that there were some custom programs made for certain schools for interviewing alone, but you can go into Zoom and you can open up a meeting with just yourself, and you can kind of have the interface on. You can start pretending like you're answering questions. You can record yourself in Zoom so you can listen back to it, check your posture, check if you're saying your ums and ahs and whats a lot. So I think that's another virtual or in-person interview. It's a good tip too.
Yeah. Make sure you're not like twirling your hair or like, I don't know, doing anything that's just distracting from what you're trying to say. It's just nice to catch those things. And sometimes it can be difficult to realize you're doing them if you've never seen yourself speak before. Yeah. What about answering specific kinds of questions?
What
about answering specific kinds of questions? Like what's your formula for answering a question about yourself? How do you tackle that?
Okay, yeah. So this is really good. Like we were talking about before, do a lot of practice, and the best way to practice, in my opinion, is practicing with other people also applying to med school. If you know your friends applying, get in contact with them, be like, hey, let's practice some questions and give each other feedback. But the big thing is you kind of want to be able to twist the questions they ask to answers that you've already practiced. For example, and I'm just making this up on the spot, so I don't know if it's going to be the best example. Maybe you practiced, um, explain to me a time you were a leader, okay? That's a question you practice. And you're talking about how you're like the president of some club on campus. Now, during the actual interview, they ask you, tell me a time when you came into conflict with something. Now, you can switch this question, reword it to display how you were a leader. You can talk about a conflict that happened while you were a leader and then change it to show the same answer that you practice, explaining why you are a leader, if that kind of makes sense. So, by practicing all these questions, you can kind of reword them to answer pretty much any personal question. Obviously, this doesn't work with ethics because ethics is going to have like its own um, kind of ground and its own logic applied to it. But for all these personal questions, the more you practice, like you can pretty much answer anything.
Yeah. And also another thing to consider is if you're talking about a specific experience, be aware of anything that might not be like immediately clear what it is to the panelists and define that. So for me, and I kind of messed this up, I guess you could say. I started talking about an experience with rowing. Yay.
Yo,
And I mentioned
no way.
I mentioned that
rowed?
I mentioned that I was a coxswain. I mentioned that I was a
way.
coxswain. And I went through my whole answer. And then one of the panelists said, what's a coxswain? And I hadn't explained that I'm the person who sits in the boat and like and it was kind of integral to my answer because I'm not just like I'm not an athlete. I lead
Your
the boat.
GPS.
I am a GPS. I make the like game time decisions, stuff like that. And I had been so immersed in the rowing world for so long that it didn't occur to me that like, yeah, these people probably have no idea what a coxswain is because who knows what a coxie is? Like, come on. So if you have like and it doesn't even have to be like that specific. If you have a role in a club, kind of explain like what you do, what that club is about, what your role is about, and then go into your answer. Because A, that shows that you have good communication skills with the interviewer, and B, it makes your answer more impactful. Because it's giving it more context. So it is important to consider that when you're answering questions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, kind of what Abby was saying too, and something that I wish I took more advantage of in the past is not only practicing with friends, but a lot of the pre-med societies will put on like virtual interview days. And I'm going to give a little shout out. I won't be able to attend, but Haley and Advait are actually working with the UN Pre-Med Society, I believe on the 23rd. And that's for their virtual interview day. And those are so, so, so helpful because you have people like these two who have gone through interviews and they'll do mock interviews. So you kind of get a sense of what it's like. And even not just even practicing with your friends, taking it a step further and practicing doing a whole interview, similar to how when you were doing your MCAT, you would sit through your whole 7.5 hour test or 5 hours if you were doing it this year. Being able to sit through an interview and kind of get that feeling, that will help you a lot. And again, I don't even think it's so much the content because you can never know what questions they're going to ask you, but kind of minimizing those distractions that happen throughout the day, or working through if you stumble on your words or mess up your words, how to not freak out, for lack of a better term. That'll all make your interview go a lot smoother. And honestly, you'll come off as really good too.
Also, if you're anything like me, you're going to feel like an idiot when you do those things. Like when you practice with your friends, you're going to be so embarrassed and hate it. And when you go practice at these freedom things, you're going to be so embarrassed and hate it. And I avoided those things because I felt like an idiot. And I wish that I had done them so bad. And we'll talk about that a little bit later or soon probably. But you have to get over that. Like you just have to do it anyway. Everybody feels like it. Nobody likes doing that. Nobody likes it. You giggle with your friends. Do it anyway, please, because you will.
The whole point of this is to improve. Yeah. So like if you're messing up now, you might be a little embarrassed, but like it's better to mess up now than mess up during the actual thing, you know?
And when you get to med school, you're going to have to interview patients or standardize patients in front of your friends anyways. So it's going to happen. You know, we used to do it in person. Now we do it virtually, but interviewing is an integral part to medicine. And this is your first part of it. It's your first step of your journey, as they would say in The Bachelor, my journey.
I know Kylie. sorry, I know Kylie talked a lot about like reaching out to pre-med societies and stuff like that, but I'm pretty sure your university itself should also offer like mock interviews and stuff. These mock interviews
Yeah,
are going to be
like
targeted more towards jobs, not exactly med school, but you can still attend them and it's still interview practice. You're still practicing speech and like talking. So I also recommend registering for maybe one or two of those if you can.
Yeah, Guelph's Career Center had something like that. And I think Westerns does too. I've used Westerns for other things. Like, side note, not related to interviews though. If you have resume CVs, send them to those career centers. They are so helpful. That's just a little side note.
Mm-hmm.
Great place. Everything.
I'm pretty sure every university has one. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
What about ethical questions? How do you guys tackle the ethics questions?
Oh, I forget.
So for ethics, I think the big thing here is do not state your opinion on anything unless they specifically ask for your opinion on something. Unless it's something like really easy to give your opinion on, like, are Nazis bad? Yeah, they're pretty bad. But normally, like, try to not give your opinion on anything, like especially something controversial, because you never know what the physicians on the panel feel about that specific topic. But the big thing, in order to answer all the questions, I think, is it's similar to Casper, where you have to look at both sides of the argument. Even if one might seem wrong on the surface, you still have to look at both sides as to why something's happening. So here, let me give you a quick example.
Give us a little example.
I'll give you guys an example.
Dive in, Advait. Tell us about the ethics.
Let's do an example here. So suppose this is the question. You're working at a pizza store, and at the end of the day, your employer tells you to throw out all the pizza. Okay, like whatever pizza's left over, you have to throw it out. That's what your employer says. And like no exceptions. Then one day, somebody who's homeless or really hungry comes into your store. At the end of the day, they're asking for a free slice. Do you give it to them? Now, obviously, the easiest answer would be, yeah, we give them the slice. But the thing is, you have to look at both sides of the argument, or at least think from both sides before you answer. So when you're saying your answer, speak from the perspective of the person who wants the pizza first. Be like, oh, I understand. This person's really hungry. This person wants food. I really want to help them out and give them the pizza. But then you also want to say, however, my employer might be upset with this, and I have to follow his rules that he has established, and he told me that I have to throw out the pizza. There must be a reason for this. Maybe the reason we have to throw out the pizza is because the pizza is colder at the end of the day. It's not as fresh, and because of that, I don't know, there's like more germs on it or something, or it's a health hazard that has been complained about in the past. I'm just making something up, right? But the point is, before you answer, you want to look at both sides and then finally come to a conclusion. Maybe your answer will be like, for today, I will buy this person a pizza. I can't just give it away for free because I do work here. So maybe I'll buy this person one slice. I'll still end up throwing away all the pizza. And then tomorrow I'll talk with my employer about potentially donating the pizza left at the end of the day to different food banks or food services. So that's just like an example where you want to look at both sides before you answer the question. And I just made that like up on the spot. So it's not the best one, but it's a little bit of thought process.
I think that is, exactly what you're supposed to do. And then the one thing that I learned, because I took a ethics course in undergrad and going through like the 4 pillars. So like the beneficence, like looking at each side, like the benefit, non-maleficence, I believe is the other one, where it's do no harm. So going through like exactly what Advait said, like from the employer's point of view versus the customer's point of view, and doing no harm to both those people, and then autonomy, being able to make choices, and then the justice would be the other one. And so I think like with ethics going through, I know a lot of people like doing right. I didn't personally read it, but that's a great resource to use to frame your answers just like how Advait said it.
Yeah, and if you don't know what doing right is, it's pretty much like a medical book with just a bunch of medical ethics questions, and it's a question and answer and explains why the answer is what it is. So it's a really good book for interviews in terms of ethics. A lot of students use it to practice interviews in Canada and the States and things like that.
The big thing about ethics questions is they want to know your thought process. So you want to kind of think out loud with these questions. And I remember there was a particular ethics question during my Western panel interview where they asked me to argue both sides of something. And I won't get into the specifics because we're not supposed to talk about specific questions that we got. But one side, very easy for me to argue. And then the other, like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't argue it. And I said to them, like, I'm having a very difficult time with this because this viewpoint clashes with what I believe so much. And I said, but thinking through it, this would maybe be my explanation for it. This would be my viewpoint. These would be my arguments. And I kind of like thought out the problem. And I said, but honestly, like, I think that my arguments for the other side were much stronger. And so I kind of acknowledged to them that, like, yeah, I do have biases here, and it was appropriate within the context of the question. Like Advait said, on more controversial things, you probably don't want to pick a side the way that I did, but this was not a very controversial subject. And I acknowledged, I was like, yeah, I do have a bias towards this side. So I'm recognizing that it's a lot easier for me to make up arguments for this side, and that's why I'm struggling with this other viewpoint a little bit. And I think at the end of the day, I don't know if that helped or hurt me. I didn't know if that was a good idea or not, but I got in, so hopefully it was okay. But what I'm trying to say really is that you want to just think through all of your arguments and all of the viewpoints out loud. That's what they want to hear. They don't want to hear that you get the right ethical answer necessarily. They want to see if you can think about these things critically from both viewpoints and kind of think your way through it. That's what's important about ethics questions. So practice doing that, because it does feel silly at first that you're like saying all your thoughts out loud, but it is a good thing to practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no simple right or wrong answer for a lot of ethics questions. Sometimes there might be one thing that is a little bit more right than the other, but as long as you kind of explain why you chose the answer, and explain your entire thought process, like what Haley said, I think it'll be all right.
Also, another tip, there's going to be water on the table. You're allowed to drink that. It's not
online,
there,
maybe not, but yeah.
Like, oh yeah, maybe not online, but if you're doing your actual interview, sorry, I was just thinking about this because I was drinking water. It's not a trick. I think Molly told us a story a few weeks ago when we had a podcast about someone who spilled water on themselves during the interview. I believe that was her story. But I mean, you're allowed to drink the water. It's a lot of talking. I drank the whole thing. I asked them to get me extra water. Just a fun fact.
Meanwhile, for me, I accidentally drank, or I should say ate the ice, because my cup was like 75% ice, like 25% water. So before I could answer, I was just like munching on ice for a solid like 20-30 seconds, and everyone was just staring at me in the room. So that was nice.
You should have been like, I'm sorry, I'm anemic, and so I get the urge to chew on ice. Medical condition.
Look at that subtle flex.
Sleep-deprived Advait chewing on ice. And they're asking him questions.
Like legit, no, they're asking a question. I was just like chewing on ice, and then like I put my hand up for a second, like over my mouth, to like show that I was still eating, and they're like, okay, yeah.
Advait, did you wear a purple tie?
No, I didn't. That's people say that if you don't know what she's talking about.
Apparently, if you wear a purple tie to the Western interviews, if you are a tie-wearing individual, you are more likely to get in. That's the rumor.
That's the rumor. I don't believe it because I did not wear a purple tie and I got in. One of my friends was crazy about that. He wore a red tie to Toronto. He wore like a purple tie to Western.
Why red to Toronto? I thought Toronto was blue.
Was it? I forgot the colors, but I remember he wore like something specific. He wore red somewhere.
Queens?
Maybe
Ottawa?
Queens.
Mac?
I forget.
They're all
this
red.
guy had an interview like every school in Ontario.
Those people.
Yeah. I ended up going to UT, but yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Do you guys have any other tips? That's pretty much my big stuff.
I think maybe we should dive into how we prepped for interviews.
Yes.
Specifically, yeah, for sure.
Who wants to kick us off?
I'll go.
Okay.
So, whoops. So for my interview, I took a year off between undergrad and interviewing, so I didn't have the ability to access some of the programs that we used to have at Guelph. I know they did exist, like having mock interviews. There was mock MCATs, but because I wasn't at school and I didn't live in Guelph, it wasn't something that was readily accessible to me. So I decided, because I had the ability to, sign up for one of those online courses on interviews. There's a few, you can look, you can Google them. And I think that was really helpful for me because it was someone to watch them, and I didn't have a lot of friends applying to medicine at the same time. I mean, I can make Nick listen to them, but he got sick of listening to me all the time about medicine. I mean, he's still sick of listening to me all the time about medicine. That's fine. But yeah, so that was really, really nice. And with them, you can pick different packages depending on what you want. So they have courses that kind of just explain to you. And by course, I mean, it's like a 20-minute video that explains interviewing to you. And then how many assessed interviews you want to get, that's an option as well. So I think I remember doing 2, and one of them was done with a med student, which was really great. And then the other one was actually done with the person who runs the company. So I assumed that this individual had a lot of experience in interviewing, and it was nice because they would give you the interview questions, and I don't remember all the details about it because it's getting a bit foggy now. But they would prepare you for certain ways or stop in certain situations, and they went through everything with you very well. So I do recommend that if you have the ability to pay for it. That being said, they do get a little bit pricey sometimes. So I 100% do not think they are necessary. And if I was still in undergrad, would I have done it? Probably not, just because I could access those resources at school for free. And I don't think it gives you a total leg up, but I did find it helpful, and I probably would do it again. I didn't read Doing Right personally as well, just because I did a philosophy course in my undergrad and I really liked it. Maybe I should have reviewed it a little bit more just to kind of like really zone in on that ethical framework when answering questions. But at the same time, I don't think it hindered me too much. I mean, here now, so I guess they saw something in me. And the recording myself on my computer, that was also really helpful as well. And there's just little things that you don't pick up on. Like I can see myself doing it right now on Zoom, like moving my hands a lot. I touch my hair all the time. I remember I was actually watching a podcast back a few weeks ago, and I was like, holy crap, I fidget so much. So these are good things that you can pick up on, and you obviously don't want those to be distracting for anyone who's interviewing you. So that's a really helpful tip as well. Get a good night's sleep the night before, unless you're Advait and you're flying around Canada.
I didn't have an option.
But and also just like, don't panic. I think I didn't fall asleep till 2 a.m. that night either, just because I was freaking out. At Western, they love in person to jump out the door at you, which I was not expecting at all. So don't let things throw you too off guard that day. It is, looking back on it, it's stressful because of how much the day means. But at the end of the day, it'll all work out. Just like I tell myself in residency as well. It'll all work out one day. I'm just reiterating the same words to myself. So yeah, those are basically what I did and what I would do differently. It also, with interviewing too, the one last thing is that you find out Mac will find out soon if they're following their old timelines, and Western and all the other schools will find out towards the end of January in Ontario, whatever. There's a lot of time that goes by between that interview and between when you get your interview date. I think I had almost 2 months because I was the second interview weekend at Western. And it's hard not to let it consume you, but make sure you're doing your other things, like your other hobbies, what you like to do in your free time. I know right now there's not a whole lot to do except watch Netflix. But when I was really stressed out back when I was interviewing, I started knitting, and I still have my scarf from when I was super stressed out. So it sucks. But whenever I couldn't be on my phone anymore, because there's a lot of forums online like Pre-Med 101, Student Doctor Network, and they can stress you out a lot. So this was my distraction from my phone. So just finding little things that can help you stay grounded, do some yoga. Those would be my main tips as well. But yeah, you'll get through it. Just like we all will.
Just like we all will, especially in residency.
Okay,
you're going next?
Yeah.
Not too bad. I'm going next.
Okay.
Now you can go next. I'm joking.
Thanks. You just really send me through a roller coaster of emotions all the time.
Go for it.
So I did not adequately prepare for my interviews, and there's a lot of things that I wish I had done differently. I had jobs and stuff throughout school, and I always felt pretty comfortable with interviewing, so I thought that I was good to go, which was very cocky on my part looking back at it. The medical school interview is a whole different ballgame because you're not applying for a part-time job. So even if you find that you are very comfortable with interviews, practice anyway, because you'll thank yourself for it when you get there. There were, if you look up in interviewing resources online, you can find lists of questions. like huge lists of questions. And I think that's a really good resource to get together with some friends and just go through it and answer all of them and critique each other. And if you know any medical students, I'm sure some of them, if they have some free time and you're really nice to them, would be willing to look at your or listen to your questions and answers. There's also the resources we were talking about at school, so I do that. But one thing that I kind of half did that I am fully doing for CARMS is keep a little spreadsheet of your experiences. And in one
or journal.
Or a journal, yeah. So like you can have your experiences, you can write down like little reflections. They just need to be like 2 sentences of things that like really impact you or you think would be a good answer to an interview question. Write that stuff down because you forget it all. And then also you can attach some like CanMed's keywords to it. So you can be like, yeah, I was a leader in this situation. If you kind of have that little bank going, then when they ask you a question, you have so many experiences that you've already really reflected on to pull from. So I'm keeping something like that on my computer for CARMS, where if I have experiences with patients or in different clubs and groups, I just go and I write that stuff down and kind of reflect on it. And I think that is a really good thing to have in your back pocket, because you don't realize how much that you actually forget or you can't call to mind during the interview because you're in a stressful situation, or you just don't think about it later because there's so many different things going on in all of our lives. But I think that's a super handy tool and definitely something that I would recommend. So like if you're in first year, start it now. It doesn't need to be super detailed, just like, oh, I took this leadership role on this club and I faced this challenge that I didn't expect, and it showed how I can be a good communicator. And that's it. And then you have this huge list of experiences to pull from when they ask you questions. And I think that's super, super valuable. And then
even with what Haley was saying too, like there's going to be situations like interpersonal conflicts, for example, that in the moment were a really big deal, but you won't even think about it down the road. It'll be totally gone from your head because the situation has worked out. But those situations that you've worked out are so important because there's a solution to that problem that you can talk about. So it's important to write everything down. I do the same thing. I have a little journal with all my little things that have happened in my life. Bless you.
Thank you. And then what was the other thing I was going to say? We talked about it earlier. I can't remember. Oh, sorry. Go to all of those things that are like those mock interviews that are hosted by your school or by your friends or whatever, even if you feel like an idiot going to them. Nobody's going to make fun of you. That's always my number one concern, is being made fun of. That's my biggest fear in life. Expose myself. So I'm always worried that I'm going to go to these mock interviews. I'm going to say something and everybody's going to turn and be like, haha, you're such an idiot. Why would you say that, you dumb idiot? But rationally, nobody's going to do that to you.
I might.
So just, hi, it's Finn's dinner time. Is it dinner time? Yeah. So go to those. But yes, that is my experience, my tips and tricks. What do you think, Abby?
Those are pretty good. Mine's was also lack of preparing. So I could have prepared a lot more. But the thing is, similar to Haley, I applied when I was in 4th year. And I was really busy I had my thesis going on. I had a job on campus. I was exec in like president position of a bunch of clubs. Just super busy all the time.
Humble brag.
Am I making an excuse for not preparing? Maybe. I probably could have prepared. But I was very busy. But
yeah, we get it. You're very involved in school.
I mean, not right now. Not in med school. I'm not really involved at all. I'm just chilling. I chill really hard.
Really hard.
Relative to Kylie and Haley, at least. But one thing I did was I practiced a lot with my friends because I was applying with my friends in 4th year. So we would always just do some mock interviews with each other. Another thing I did was, because I had an interview at Ottawa and it was open panel, I knew that they could ask anything from my OMSAS application. So I went through everything in my OMSAS application and at least thought of like a short story I can say about every position I put in, or like share some kind of really valuable experience about everything. So even if you don't have an open interview, I still think that's important. Just going through your OMSAS or your Western essays or your Toronto essays, whatever, and remembering what you actually put down in those. Just in case they ask you about that. Especially in Toronto, they can ask you a question about your essays. So you definitely want to do that. I read a little bit of Doing Right. They have some good practice questions on there. I think University of Washington has a bioethics page. If you just Google University of Washington bioethics, you'll get a huge page on that. And I really think that's a good thing to read over. They have some good examples and some good definitions and things like that. What else did I do? Not me personally, but one of my friends read the book Better Now, which is written by a Canadian physician. And it's also like an ethics book, but it's way more Canadian oriented. The thing with Doing Right is that it's American oriented. It's still a really good book because it has a lot of different clinical experiences that can be applicable in Canada as well. But Better Now is Canadian specific with Canadian problems. So that might be a good book to check out. And the biggest thing was memorizing CanMeds and thinking of an experience that fulfills all the different roles on CanMeds. So if you guys don't know what CanMeds is, or you didn't watch one of the episodes where we talked about it, it's essentially the characteristics that every med school in Canada is looking for in a medical student. The CanMeds include communicator, collaborator, leader, health advocate, scholar, professional. So you definitely want to think of an experience that can fulfill all those different categories. But other than that, yeah, it's honestly interviewing it's all practice. The more you practice, the better you get at it.
Also, watch the news in
Watch
the
the news,
like
yeah.
weeks leading up to your interview. We didn't really talk about that, but sometimes you will get questions on like current events. I would not be surprised if there were COVID questions in this year's interviews. So kind of be just up to date with how everything's going. I mean, you don't need to be like a policy expert. That's not the point. But you
Mhm.
do need to be like
Aware.
aware of what's going
Yeah.
on in the world.
Yeah, the thing is,
Even-
like, at the interviews, they treat you like you don't know anything, okay? They're not expecting you to know what surgeries a neurologist, like a neurosurgeon does,
Yeah.
and things like that. They'll explain everything. But having a little bit of background knowledge definitely helps answer some of these questions.
That's the other thing that I feel like people get nervous about. None of your questions on your medical school interviews will require medical knowledge. None
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah. Honestly, even now, like, okay, coming into the middle of second year and how our curriculum works is we're pretty much done with the didactic learning, but they still don't have crazy high expectations for us. Like they know that we're just students. They know we have no clinical experience at the moment, especially with COVID. And that's where a lot of that learning comes in clerkship, and they do help you along. So by no means are they expecting you to know any kind of medicine when you come for your interview. I don't even know if the word like medicine obviously was uttered because it was a medical interview, but within the questions, I think it was a pretty straight. Nothing surprised me. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, well, I hope you guys have enjoyed this extended guest appearance by Finnegan. I don't know why he's hanging out so much, but he's in a good mood.
He wants to be the fourth member and
He looks
start
so
the show.
tired.
He
wants to
wants
go to
dinner.
sleep.
Hi, Finny. Say hello.
He doesn't like us.
With that, Kylie also wants dinner. Not to speak about myself in the third person, but I also would like dinner.
All right, so
let's wrap her up, guys.
That is a wrap. Episode 18.
Thank you for
Basics to
joining
interviews.
us today. We hope some of our tips and tricks helped you. If you have any questions, message us on Instagram. We will be doing more interview oriented episodes in the future. So keep an eye on the Instagram stories if you have specific questions you want us to answer. And we do have some very exciting episodes coming up in the next few weeks. So stay tuned for that.
We do.
And that's it. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for joining us, guys. We'll see you all next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Peace.